In 1845, Henry David Thoreau built a cabin on the shores of Walden Pond, and he tracked every single expense. It cost him $28.12.5. He tracked every nail, every board, every item that went into his cabin. Now, why did he do that? Because he knew at that time that people had no idea what their lives were costing them. That was 180 years ago. I can guarantee you that same issue exists today. So in this episode, number 2 in the Living Walden series, we're going to be tracking expenses. I'll show you how you can find out how much your life is costing you and then determine whether it's a worthwhile trade or maybe you want to make some changes. Steve here, Street Smart Travel. This is another episode in my Living Walden series where I took the ideas from Thoreau's Walden experiment, his book, and applied them to my life down here in South America in 2025. And today, we're going to be looking at the first chapter of the book, which interestingly wasn't about nature. When everybody thinks about Walden, that's the first thing they think about, leaving the city and living in nature. The first chapter was about economy. Not the economy, not GDP numbers or employment numbers, but about your personal economy. How much money are you earning? How much of your life energy are you exchanging for that income? And then what are you spending that income on? And is it a good trade? I'll be revealing my 2025 budget numbers. How much did it cost me to live for the entire year of 2025 in South America? And I'll tell you, it was pretty surprising. I even amazed myself with this one. Also, in the first episode, if you didn't get a chance to see that, I'll leave a link to it in the description. It sets the table. We talked about wants versus needs and living a simple life. At the end of the episode, I issued a challenge, 2 levels, and it was basically to give something up for an amount of time to see if you missed it. And I had a bunch of comments, some really nice and insightful comments from that episode. Thanks to everybody who commented. And if you would like to follow up this month and say, here's what I decided to forego for either 7 days or 30 days based on last month's challenge, and here's how that went. Did you follow up with it? Did you follow through? If you did, what did you learn? I track every time I spend money. I make a note of it. I have a very simple spreadsheet. I'm sure you could find an app to do the same thing. You could do it longhand in a ledger if you wanted to. I just have a very simple Excel spreadsheet that I use that has the date, the item, and the cost, and maybe a note next to it if there was something worth noting. Then at the end of the month, I can see what did I spend and what did I spend it on. And I go back and look, okay, do I need to spend this much money on this thing? Can I change this? Maybe I want to spend more money on something instead of less. It's not about deprivation. It's about finding out through awareness, where are you spending your money, and then deciding if you want to keep spending money in that way, or if maybe you want to make some changes. That's the focus of this episode. Now, Thoreau lived very simply. He tracked 4 very simple expenses: food, shelter, clothing, and warmth, which today would be utilities. And he broke down everything to the penny. He also figured out, by the way, how he could work for 6 weeks a year and have the other 46 weeks to do whatever he wanted with. Now, his central question: what does your life actually cost? And what are you trading to pay for it? The cost of a thing is the amount of what I will call life, which is required to be exchanged for it immediately or in the long run. How much of your life energy, time, which is non-renewable, did you trade for the income that you made, and then what are you doing with that income? This is the basis of this month's experiment. Let's say you want to buy a shirt. Shirt's $50. For the sake of easy math, let's say you make $20 before taxes. So before you pay any taxes, that's 2.5 hours of your life you're exchanging for that shirt. You're not getting those 2.5 hours back. They're gone. Is it worth it to you to spend 2.5 hours of your life energy, your time, which you can never replace, in exchange for that shirt? Or do you maybe want to try and do it a different way? Do you want to buy a second-hand shirt? Or decide, actually, I don't need that shirt right now. I can do something else with the money. And if you choose to not spend that money, and this is key, what do you do with it? What if you put it into a bank account that was earning some amount of interest, and at the end of the year you had $1,200 plus whatever the interest was? Could you use that as a budget for a vacation or for some other expense that you really want to spend money on but you're having trouble saving for? So these are the trade-offs you can make when you're tracking your income. A man is rich in proportion to the number of things which he can afford to let alone. Wealth isn't what you have, it's what you don't need. Tracking your monthly budget, no fun, boring, tedious. There is nothing I like about it, but I've been doing it for decades, and because I have, I'm very aware of where I spend money. I have a lot more choices because I'm not wasting money on things that I don't need and that I really don't want. I'm not suggesting you strip your life down to the boards like I did, but I will at the end of this video give you a couple challenges that will give you a chance to track your expenses. If you're aware of where your money's going, you're going to have a lot more options open to you than if you're just spending money and with no awareness. The bigger issue is that most people don't have a spending problem as such. They have an awareness problem. They don't know where their money's going, and every month they go, how did I spend all that money? Where did it go? What did I do with it? Once you become aware of it, you see where it's going, you can make some changes and decide how you want to spend your money. I didn't start by cutting expenses. When I first started tracking my expenses and income and seeing where my money was going, it was just to see, what am I spending money on? Like, do I want to spend money on that? Yeah, maybe not so much. Or I actually do want to spend money on that, and maybe more than I'm spending right now. Once you have that awareness, you can make some better decisions. It could be the difference between having extra money in the bank to spend on things that you choose very consciously to spend it on versus spending money just because you happen to have it in the bank. Those are two very different scenarios, and over time they lead to two very different outcomes. My Ecuador budget, living in South America for all of 2025. What's the number? How much did I spend? To live in Ecuador for the year, it cost me $1,988.24 US. So let's round that up and call it $1,989 US dollars on the year, not the month, on the year. And in Canadian dollars, that was $2,771 for the entire year. That's $165.69 US. So let's call that 166 US dollars, or just under 231 Canadian dollars. My goal was to come in under $2,000, and I did that. I spent the last 4 days of 2025 in Colombia. The total for the year of living in South America, Colombia, and Ecuador is $2,121.39. So let's call that 2,122 US dollars. And in Canadian, that was $2,971 on the year. That's, let's call it 177 US dollars a month, rounded that up a bit, and 248 Canadian dollars on the month. That was my cheapest year so far, living down here in South America. The year before, 2024, I spent 2,446 US dollars, or 3,341 Canadian dollars on the year. On the monthly, that becomes $203.81 US, and Canadian $278.40. So I refined the system, and I ended up cutting over $400 out of my annual budget, 400 US dollars out of the annual budget. I don't think I can do this for any less than that, and if I did, I would be feeling deprived. That's not the point of this experiment. The point of my experiment was to live as simply as I could while still enjoying my life. I had entertainment, there's a bunch of transportation, there's food and accommodation and medical and whatever. All kinds of different expenses are in there. That's everything I spent, including the cell phone bill, for the entire year. So again, just to sum up those numbers, my entire outlay for 2025 living in South America, 2,122 US dollars, or 2,971 Canadian dollars. I was quite impressed with that. I'm going to be doing a lot more travel this year and next year, so there's going to be flights and things involved. I don't think it's realistic to try to aim for that again. I just wanted to lock down a year of my life and see what is it going to cost me for the entire year to live the way that I want to live and enjoy my life. I'm not depriving myself or feeling like, oh, I really wish I could afford to do this. Like, if there was something I wanted to do, I did it. How little money do you need to live the kind of life that you really want to live? Intentionally. It took me years to come up with an answer for that. I used to spend that much money, so let's call it 2,122 US dollars or 2,971 Canadian dollars. Not every month, but certainly every 2 months, maybe every 6 weeks. And that was as somebody who had no mortgage on my principal residence. All the other costs of my life would easily come out to 3,000 bucks Canadian every 2 months and probably every 6 weeks. So this way I got to leverage that same amount and live a life that was much more enjoyable. I had a lot more fun living down here in South America. Cost the exact same thing. I was just very intentional about making changes in my life so that I was able to do that. And here's a really important question to ask yourself. If I had to justify every purchase that I make this month by asking, is this worth the hours of my life that I'm trading to buy this thing? What would you stop buying? If you watched the first episode and you decided to give up something on easy mode for 7 days or on hard mode for 30 days, and you tracked it over that period of time and saw at the end of the 7 days or 30 days, I really didn't miss that thing. I'm going to cut it out of my life. Or, yeah, I really did miss that thing and now I know why it's in my life. Either way, you've got clarity. So a couple challenges for this month. Tier 1, easy mode. Track one spending category for a single week. 7 days. Pick whatever you want. That could be entertainment like meals out. That could be streaming services that you pay for. Whatever it is, you choose it. And just every time you spend money on it, track it, write it down. And at the end of the week, see how much money you spent on it. Review what you spent the money on and how you felt about it, and was it a worthwhile expense or not. That's it. No judgment. I'm not telling you how to live your life, but I am telling you be aware of where you're spending your money. 7 days. Easy mode. Hard mode. Option number 2. Do a 30-day spending freeze on a single category. Again, you pick the category, and then at the end of the 30 days, revisit how you feel about it. And while you're freezing that expense, instead of doing something else with that money, put that money into a place where you're not going to touch it. You could use the old jar system where you have a physical jar and you put that amount of money into it every time. You don't spend it on a coffee or a streaming service or a whatever and count it at the end of the month. Or put it into some sort of a bank account, a savings account, where you're not going to touch it, and at the end of the month, see how much money you have there, and then determine, was this a worthwhile trade, or did I feel like I was depriving myself? No right or wrong, but let's dial up the awareness so you can make some informed decisions and decide how you want to move forward based on the feedback that you determine in your own life about how you want to spend your life energy. So that's episode 2. Tracking your expenses, seeing how you're spending your money or your life energy, and deciding if it's a worthwhile trade. You determine for yourself, but just become aware of where you're spending money. Thoreau measured the costs for his cabin down to the penny, the half penny actually, $28, 12.5 cents. Measured everything that went into it. Do the same thing in your life. Do it for a week, ideally do it for a month. Every time you spend money, track it. Next month, in episode 3, where I lived and what I lived for. Your environment can either reinforce your new habits and choices or sabotage them. I'm not suggesting you take on all the challenges or stop your life and read Walden and base your entire life on that, but there's some really, really valuable lessons in there that stand the test of time, that can definitely make huge improvements in your life. This time we focused on economy, on tracking your expenses and being aware of where you're spending money, what you're spending it on, and do you want to continue doing those things or do you want to make some changes? These ideas have lasted the last 180 years. They're going to continue to last into the future. So if you want to take on these challenges, you don't need to publicly post anything. If you're not comfortable with that, don't do it. But do test yourself. Take on the challenges and say, okay, for 7 days, could I track my expenses across whatever category and then revisit them at the end of that and see if that was a worthwhile use of my capital and of my life force, really. And if it is, keep doing it. And if it isn't, make some changes. So as always, take what's useful, discard what isn't, and add what is uniquely your own. Hopefully you got some value out of this. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, share, pass this on to anybody who may find this kind of content interesting and informative. Thanks for stopping by. Happy trails. See you out on the road next Saturday.